I need you, I was going to say I want you to tell me why I'm wrong with my worldview, but I need you to tell me why I'm wrong. And my son is here too, so even to say it in front of him, the weight of it all looks hopeless to me. The weight of ignorance, of delusion, from the opening film that we saw to the discussion of what it would take for 1.6 people to change their minds about their rigorous belief, the lack of people even caring about the truth anymore in the States, what we're seeing going on, which we hoped was over, that kind of ignorance and even reveling in ignorance, feels completely hopeless. Tell me how I'm wrong and how there's still hope.
No pressure.
Well,
Good night. Good night. We're leaving.
first I have to figure out whether I really believe what I'm about to say, given my principle of not lying to you. Well, it's worth reflecting on how quickly things can change. And things can change, both for bad or for good. This cuts both ways, but things can change surprisingly quickly, and this seems to be more and more true. I mean, when you look at just, I don't know how in touch you are with this here in Canada, but in the States, our victory on gay marriage just happened in the blink of an eye. It's like there was a moment where it was sort of made progress, and then it got rolled back, and then it sort of looked hopeless, and then all of a sudden it was accomplished. There are many things like that when you look at relevant scientific breakthroughs that change people's sense of what is good or possible or what religion should be doing. The sky's the limit there, really. I mean, we can make gains that never get rolled back, or at least only get rolled back in some very fringe area where not even your average fundamentalist wants to go. So, I mean, the obvious case is understanding epilepsy, and this is the easiest example that I always go to, but there are very few, even Christian fundamentalists, who, when their child gets epilepsy, resort to just exorcism and don't go to a neurologist. I mean, if you care about your child in the 21st century, you take your child to a doctor, and it's not the average fundamentalist who resists that. And I think we shouldn't. I mean, part of it, speaking to you personally, and just how is it to sort of overcome this mood, you can spend less time focusing on the political trivia. I mean, I've actually stopped paying as much attention as I was paying to Trump, because it just became psychologically toxic to me, and there was nothing to do with it. It's like there was no benefit from it, and you can pay more attention, and you have to understand also that news is being selected for by the bad news is always rising to the top, and there's always enough bad news, given how globally connected we are now, to fill every news broadcast with seemingly the worst things that have ever happened to people every single night of the year. I mean, there's always going to be 10 murders that they could tell you about tonight somewhere, and most news most of the time is just amplifying that signal, and you're not hearing about all of the great things that are happening, and all of the technological and moral and political improvements that are happening that are not being rolled back and are not likely to be rolled back. And there is no question that we're living in the luckiest time to be alive in human history. I mean, that seems to be absolutely obvious. What other moment in history would you rather have been born? There is, my list is, there's nothing on that list for me. And so that is, you have to do a little work though to keep that salient, because what social media and the media in general is going to tell you is that the world's on fire, and you should just get ready to smell the smoke.
If I may add to that, it's important to continue to remind ourselves that just because we're hearing about it doesn't mean that's the majority, right? We hear the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, that's the case, but it doesn't mean all the wheels are squeaking, right? So when we hear these types of things happening, like Sam said, it's the news. You seeing it a lot only means the news media realizes what gets the attention and sells the advertisers. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the way the majority of people feel. Social media is not an accurate portrayal of reality. It's not real life. It's quick, hot sports opinions on the latest thing that's very uninformed. And if you look at that and think, wow, these are real human beings and this is the way they believe, it can get depressing. It really can. And the last thing that I'll leave you with on that is just that for me, anytime I see a void, I get inspired because I realize that's a place where I can make a difference. And right now, in the climate that we see, there's a lot of places for all of us to step up and make a difference. So whatever your niche is, whatever it is, I almost said niche. See how I corrected that? Whatever your niche is and whatever you enjoy doing, you can apply that in some way to make a positive difference. So you don't have to sit back and say the world's burning. You can actively help move it forward because there's plenty of room for you and all of us to step up.
Well, I feel like you both of you covered my thoughts pretty well. I can only add the more specific experience that I have as an organizer of, one of the most persecuted, groups of people around the world. And I often think about the things that you just mentioned, and it's hard not to think about the likelihoods of it all. And I try in my own head not to play that game because on the first point that they touched on, which is that we are ignorant, and we should acknowledge that we might be able to judge a likelihood here and there, but we could be wrong. But as moral and good people, our thoughts should be on what the possibility is. And if there is, a way forward ahead of us that is possible and that is good, then we should be marching in that direction. We shouldn't stop and think, well, is this politically convenient? Is this likely according to what little I know about the world? Because there's so many undercurrents that are going on all the time that are invisible to us. In the case of the ex-Muslim movement, the internet has empowered us in a way that it's hard to actually talk about it and put it into words the way that which this community that was so isolated and so disempowered and was able to find each other and find hope. And I hear from people that are in the most dire circumstances that have reasoned their way out of religion and are working to help other people like them. And if people in Egypt and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia can do it and they can find hope and they can think that this is a world worth fighting for, then I can think that way too.
So go forth and be inspired to be active in whatever it is you're doing, sir. Thank you for the question. Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks. Question mostly for Sam, but if anyone can take it.
Of course.
Sam, you've made your thoughts on free speech very clear, and I think most people here would agree with you, and I agree certainly with you. But I certainly do share Mr. Smalley's disgust for the white supremacist rallies in the U.S. Question for Sam, to paraphrase you, to use your words, what's the ethical bedrock that you would use to determine whether they have these white supremacists have the right to march, and is that expression of free speech, and where do we put the line where we say, well, you're inciting too much hate in other people, or do we use the line that we already have, which is if you're directly inciting violence or encouraging violence on other people, then that should not be allowed, but anything up to that point is okay for us to tolerate?
Yeah, well, it's a hard question. I feel like it's hard to know where the line actually is there. I feel like we have it just about right in the U.S. which is erring on the side of tolerating even the most odious speech and letting it, as you say, walk right up to the line of encouraging violence. Because I mean, the principle there is that the best way to combat this is to let it expose itself and then to show what's wrong with it, to make it look ridiculous, to satirize it, to argue against it. But I think, for instance, these countries in Europe that have made it illegal to deny the Holocaust, I think that's absolutely the wrong approach. Because what you do there is you make martyrs of the few people who make it their life's business to get locked up for this crime, and then you drive underground this ideology and this language game that is inadmissible in public because you've made it illegal, and yet you don't know how many people subscribe to it, you don't know how many people are aligning with it, and you can't put any pressure on them apart from the pressure to not make themselves known for fear of consequence. So I think it's the sunlight is the best disinfectant principle, and I think that is generally true. And it's not. I mean, I don't like seeing neo-Nazis and members of the KKK march, at all. And it does strike me as ridiculous to see the amount of public expense that has to be brought forward to protect them from the people they are saying that they would kill if they only had more power. But it's I think we should be very slow to use the violence of the state to silence speech, and it really has to be at the point where speech seems to be the proximate cause of violence itself.
You wouldn't support. Just as a very quick follow-up, then you wouldn't agree with banning certain groups, like you wouldn't ban the KKK under those premises?
Yeah, I just don't think that's the right lever to pull. I think you should be free to be as obnoxious and as stupid and as reprehensible as you want to be, and then the rest of us should be free to criticize you, to ignore you, to not go to your restaurant, to make your life as difficult as it will be if you are expressing views that are dangerous and divisive and idiotic. And so I think the pressure should come from society. But the moment you give the moment you legislate against it, then a different machinery starts working, and then who knows what the next law is going to look like. Then it'll be illegal to deny the God because of all the pain that causes people. The majority of people believe that Jesus is coming back to earth. Well, to deny that then is to offend a majority of the people in the U.S. at least. And why not make that illegal for all the harm it causes? So.
I'll add one thing. It's just a little point. I was looking at propaganda posters in Weimar, Germany, that the Nazi Party put out, and it's interesting that there was at least 3 that I found, 2 or 3, which had an image of Hitler and then a cross over his mouth like a tape, because actually they did try to ban him from speaking in Germany at the time. And so the posters had this tape over this black tape over his mouth, and it said something to the effect of, the text said something to the effect of, there's only one man who is not allowed to speak in Germany. And then the insinuation was, why don't they want the people in power want you to hear what he has to say? It's a very powerful marketing tool, censure is, and it can't actually protect you from the bigotry.
Yeah.
If you're hateful, I want to know who you are.
Right.
If your views are that destructive, I'd like you to show yourself and speak up. And like you said, if we start taking views that we all find despicable, but if we take those views and we classify that as step 1 of violence, then all of us are subject to that.
Yeah.
Then we are now, as secular people, somehow causing violence to people that are deconverting from Christianity or deconverting from Islam, and then now they're going to hell. That's us inciting violence in some way. Then you get on a very slippery slope. So I expected to disagree with something that you said about it, and I was completely on board with that.
Well, the vast majority of
It's a fine line
progressive
to walk.
movements too, like if you take a look at the things that we find, we celebrate today, something like, like homosexuality, gay pride and everything like that. That's something that's part of our ecosystem now, and that's something that's normalized now. But there was a time where it was perverse, and it was the devil's work, and it was something that many people would have found completely abhorrent, and they would have and did try to ban and get rid of. So when you're looking at it from a larger scale, and taking a look at human history and the progress of human history, it's hard to know from where you are, exactly what would be considered the most hateful thing and what wouldn't. So you have this umbrella or this large net where something that would be considered progress in the future will be caught along with the white supremacists, and you can't, how can we know that?
I mean, there's a deeper principle here. The reason why free speech strikes me as the master value is that it is the only mechanism we have to correct for our errors collectively in real time. It's like if something can't be talked about, it still exists, right? And it's still operating, but we now can't talk about it. And so it's just the open-endedness of conversation on really every topic is the only thing I see that is getting us all to converge, politically, ethically, intellectually, scientifically. I mean, everything is running on the same rails, and the rails are conversation.
The moment you make something taboo, it becomes interesting. People want to know what's behind the veil. Why can't they talk about that? Okay.
Hi. I wanted to address the point about hopelessness. My grandparents were refugees from Palestine who lived in Syria, and I was born, and basically I was living in the Middle East on the other side of the planet when I started going on the internet. When I was in grade 7, I got access to a high-speed internet, and I started watching videos for Richard Dawkins, and I heard about the God delusion, and that was kind of the age of reason to me. That was when I started learning about, because I was an ex-Muslim pretty much, and I was in a conditioned environment that was taking me away to access any sort of or any form of thing that would shatter the reality that I was living as part of in the Middle East, really. And in high school, when it was found that I was becoming atheist and a bunch of other students becoming atheists, our Islamic department canceled evolution, and they came after us. They kind of they threatened us of talking about atheism again, and basically I came here. And coming here to university is not also ideal, I would say, because when I come to university and I expect that I'm gonna get all the critical thinking skills that I'm going to be able to ask any questions I want, I get faced by the Antifa, basically being the extreme left. If you disagree with socialism, you're a white supremacist, and that's another problem, I guess. Now, I think it's a phenomenal thing that me being on the other side of the planet and making it here today is a dream for me to actually see you in front of me. I'm literally gonna be texting my friends back in Qatar, telling them about how amazing this event is, and it's just phenomenal to me. The point I wanted to address is the free will part. I agree with you. I don't believe in free will. It makes me, though, depressed because I feel that like on the Charles Murray podcast, if I'm pronouncing his name right, it's mentioned that we don't have that much control over how much we can change ourselves in terms of genetics and ability to be more intelligent and change our IQ. So it makes me feel very limited and unable to be productive or do much to change anything about life in general, in my life, I guess. So that point really depresses me. And I just wanted to sort of...
Can I speak to that?
Your point.
Yeah, because that's a very common feeling about the conclusion that free will is an illusion. Many people, I'm not one of them, but many people find it depressing. And I don't know if I can show you the other side of it, but it strikes me as, first of all, acknowledging that free will is an illusion, acknowledging that you didn't invent yourself, you didn't pick your parents, you didn't pick your genes, you didn't pick the society into which you were born. You're not responsible for your appearance in the world. And even the things you seem responsible for in terms of conventional responsibility, the kind of efforts you make to get things done, say, well, the amount of effort you're able to summon is also a product of your genes and your environment and the good conversations you've had or the ones you missed, and it's all just propagating forward. It's all just, it's just your corner of the universe doing its thing moment by moment, and there's no place to stand where you are the subjective you, the sense of the experiencer in this moment. There's no place to stand where you can own the totality of those causal processes. But one thing that cuts through is obvious bullshit like white pride or really any other kind of pride. Yeah, right.
White pride over here.
Might be the hair. I don't know.
Yeah, it must be. I knew that was coming.
That no one, you didn't. The fact that you're born white or black or any other color is not something you're responsible for, right? So you can't take credit if you think white people are better for the fact that you're one of them. And so nothing like that could conceivably be the basis of pride. But so it is with everything else, like intelligence, like just having an ability to get things done in this world. Pride is the wrong summary of your talents there. Gratitude is appropriate. I mean, when you get past, when you fully absorb the implications of there being no free will, then what you see is a world of radical differences in luck, for lack of a better word. I mean, you see there are people who are obviously incredibly lucky and people who are obviously incredibly unlucky. And insofar as you are lucky, you can feel grateful and you can feel a commitment to making the most of that luck. And again, you're making the most of it is more of the universe just doing its thing. It's not that part is really you. But what you can recognize is that you are a work in progress. There's no telling how much you can change moment to moment. And years in the future, you have no idea what you'll be like. You have no idea what you'll be like by virtue of the relationships you form or the ideas that you have or the intense experiences that suddenly intrude in your life that you didn't expect. People change radically. They don't change. I mean, their height doesn't tend to change. There are things that are kind of fixed, but it really is open. Your mind and your life is really open-ended, and it's a process of discovery, moment to moment, and nothing is fixed, really. Nothing especially important is fixed, and so there's a. I don't see it as depressing. I just see it as a circumstance where you can be gratitude and love and curiosity are always appropriate without free will. So anyway, I hope that helps.
So I know I'm going to disappoint many of you when I say we only have time for one more question. I'm very sorry about that. So talk amongst yourselves, find out who's the most important question. No, I think we'll just go with one more right here at mic one. And
all right. Well,
go ahead.
So I'm currently studying machine learning at the graduate level. So I'm going to ask you a question about AI, and I'm sure many of people have listened to your TED Talk. So I believe I've heard you say that it would be truly tragic to not have any conscious beings in this universe. And as far as the linearity of time is concerned, machines have a higher probability of thriving than us, just on a material basis. But wouldn't you say that consciousness, it would be the ultimate existential threat to humanity, considering that in the analogy of us, I wouldn't say it's intelligence, I would say it's consciousness that we choose to just defy the well-being of the ants because we just know that we have a dominance in our just in our capacity of being. So right now, as far as computer vision and natural language processing and speech recognition, we're training them according to human benchmarks. But the thing that we should be scared about would be for this machine to ultimately know that I really am the most intelligent being in this universe.
Yeah, I mean, that's an additional concern. I think the question of consciousness, consciousness and intelligence are two different variables, and I think they're certainly separable in the near term. I don't know if they're ultimately of a piece. I mean, I don't know if you get more and more and more intelligent up to the human level and beyond, if consciousness is guaranteed to come along for the ride at some point there. I think possibly not, in which case, for me, that's the worst case scenario because it opens the door to the possibility of us just turning the lights out in the universe. I mean, biological life is the only theater of consciousness we know of, and if we create some mere mechanism for whom the lights are not on, and this yet becomes the most competent and the most powerful force on Earth, and it gets away from us, and it becomes fundamentally hostile to our thriving, as is the concern, well then we've created a scenario under which the universe could go dark, essentially, and yet you'd have these super intelligent machines propagating themselves and making paper clips or doing whatever they would be doing. And I don't really see the self-consciousness in these machines being an especially scary variable, because you could run the argument the other way. So it would be consciousness that would allow for empathy and other good things that we would want in these super intelligent machines if they were in fact more powerful than we are. But I worry about competence more than consciousness. The consciousness becomes relevant on the other side, where if you're wondering about the ethical implications of building machines that can suffer, well then you're talking about conscious machines. And if we knew our machines weren't conscious and could never be under a certain paradigm, no matter how intelligent they got, well then there'd be no scope to wonder whether or not we're creating a hell and populating it with intelligent minds that can suffer, which would obviously be a terrible thing to do, although it apparently didn't stop God from doing it.
Thank you for the question. Please give a big round of applause for Travis Pangburn and Pangburn Philosophy for putting this event together. Sam Harris and Sarah Haider. Good job.
Sarah Haider, everyone.